Welcome to the Brothers in Prayer podcast. Now, with your hosts Drew Hammond, Xander Johnson, and Dylan Burkett.
Hello, guys, and welcome back to what I would call season 2 of the Brothers in Prayer podcast.
We're starting it up again.
So
baby.
we got it started last year. Obviously, we took a break over the summer. I had a great summer. I know you guys did too. And we are back for more, and I'm super excited about it. So I'm Drew Hammond.
I'm Xander Johnson.
I'm Dylan Burkett.
And we are all students at CBC High School here to talk a little more about Brothers in Prayer and kind of really the impact that it's had this year.
Exactly. So we started off the year right out of the gate with a talk titled "What's the Meaning of Life?" Right? You start right off talking about life and its meaning, which is really boils down to loving God and letting God love you. And so really how you do that is just using your unique gifts and talents given to you by God to really give everything you do in life back to God. And so that's kind of like where I went with that talk. There was another like really good talk that happened this year, and that was so a student here at CBC, John Worth, talked all about kind of how suffering can like, play an impact in your faith life. Do you have anything on that?
Fantastic talk. Okay, so, So suffering, in a weird way, I love the concept of suffering because for me, if you think about the Bible, Jesus really, if you think about his story, it's really all about suffering in a weird way, right? And it kind of, obviously the story of the cross kind of comes to mind for me, but more especially when he was tempted in the desert, suffering is temptation is a form of suffering, right? And so that's kind of helped me in my own journey. I've had a lot of medical issues in the past, and so I guess I remember one day I was diagnosed with a disease called ulcerative colitis. It's crazy, super complicated. You can look it up if you have the free time. Long story short, I eventually one day was just feeling kind of down about it, and I just kind of sat there and I was thinking about kind of how I'm going to take this diagnosis mentally. And for me, I made myself a promise that one thing I would never do is I would never ask, why me, right? Because I think that question is really interesting, but it has kind of a negative connotation to it of like, why do I have to go through this? Like, why did God give me this as a burden, right? But then the more I started thinking about it, the more I was like, okay, well then the adverse to that question would be, why not me, right?
Exactly.
And I was thinking about that a lot too, because I was like, okay, well, yes, God gave me this, and yes, it's not very fun, and yes, I have to deal with it, but at the same time, I truly believe that suffering is an opportunity for you to grow closer to God through your pain, if that makes sense, right?
That's exactly what John talked about.
Absolutely.
As well. Because for those of you who don't know, John Worth, he tore his ACL, and he had to go through surgery and all of that and rehab, and he talked about how he was just laying there at night, looked up at the ceiling, and was like, God, if you're there, I need you, help me. So really it was through that suffering, anchoring to God and turning to God was really what his story was, and just growing his faith through just going through all that. I think another thing we want to talk about is the Brothers in Prayer Retreat, which happened this year. Actually, a couple weeks ago. It was fantastic. We talked all about relationships on that retreat, various relationships. You got friendships, dating, your relationship with God, relationship with Mary, and your relationship with your family. All various things we talked about. I know you weren't on the retreat, you couldn't go, but you guys obviously know what we talked about. Any comments regarding the retreat?
None for me, I don't think.
Yeah.
No, I think relationships, it's a very broad topic, and so I would just say be aware of those relationships that you think may not be the best for you. And I think that's kind of one of the hardest things to do is like taking the time just to reflect on your life and the people that are in your life. Yeah. And that's something I've really had to work on a lot in the past really year, is just thinking about the people that I actually enjoy spending time with, right? Because I kind of kept like finding myself getting into this cycle of like hanging out with friends and then going home at night and then just feeling like I completely wasted my time, if that makes sense, right? So I hung out with these people for 3 hours, and what did we do? We sat on a couch and watched a movie we didn't talk, we didn't socialize at all. We were just kind of sitting there just killing time, right? Which is fun on some occasions, but when you're doing that every single night over and over again, it's just not life-giving. Yeah. And so I had to kind of take the time to reflect on what relationships were actually beneficial to me and which ones were actually kind of pushing me to be the best version of myself and pursue those ones as opposed to the ones that you may think or want to pursue that are just kind of empty roads, basically.
Because I think one thing we really talked about was being authentic in your various relationships and not kind of being that like fake version of yourself, but also going along with that is actually making sure you're involved in relationships to which you actually want to be involved in and would be good.
Yeah, I can relate to that a lot too, especially with the authenticity part. For me, with COVID, it's definitely a huge challenge that occurred over quarantining and all sorts of stuff like that. Being authentic and always being real in yourself. I feel like it was so easy, as punny as this is, to put a mask over yourself, not only in real life, but also emotionally with your friends. And just not have to show 100% of who you are because of COVID. You know, it was, for me at least, it became so easy to make that excuse of, no, I can't hang out because of such and such, or I don't want to do any COVID-friendly activities, and just because I didn't feel like being sociable. And to a certain extent, that's a good thing, you know, being by yourself, meditating, enjoying all free time, stuff like that. But to an extent with me, it got to the point where it was too much, you know. I wasn't hanging out at all with anyone just because I had that option. And I think that's something that, for me, relationship-wise, I definitely had to work through and actually, you know, put in the effort and figure out how to continue through COVID and everything to keep putting in that effort into my relationships.
Heck yeah. And one thing I do want to hit on real quick. Dylan, I have always looked up to you because of your relationship with your wonderful girlfriend. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that? You've been dating for how long? How long?
We've been dating for 3.5 years as of like a month
Money.
ago.
That's money. And so what's like the 3 biggest takeaways from your relationship with your girlfriend?
3 biggest takeaways. I think the first one would be our faith together, you know? And this is coming from a Catholic person at a Catholic school. This is a Catholic podcast. Big things. But for me, you know, getting into a relationship with her, it started off as just good friends. We actually met through confirmation groups, right? And that is just something that, like, to me, I felt like that was kind of just like God, like, here you go, because I never knew anything about her before that or whatever. And it's really special because in order for us to, how we really grew our relationship and still continue to grow it is through faith, you know? The way we like to work at it is that I like to think of it as a triangle, you know? You have both people in the relationship down here and you have God at top. You know, if this link between you two is really strong, that's great, but you'll never really have that full connection with each other unless you have that at the top too with God.
Absolutely.
It's really
So
good.
yeah,
Money.
I'd say, yeah, that just, you know, loving each other, being kind to each other, and always laughing. Laughing is a huge one too. You said list 3 things, so that's why I'm listing 3.
All right, that's awesome. Good stuff.
Awesome. Another thing we talked about on that retreat was our obligation to spread the gospel, which you guys do very, very well. Obviously, you're on this podcast. And just
try.
what that's all about is how when you're baptized, right, you're baptized priest, prophet, and king. So through that baptism, you kind of have this obligation to spread the gospel. And what that looks like is different to each individual person and how you live out your faith each day and just not being afraid to live it out. And that doesn't mean like shoving it down people's throats and being that like really, really vocal person. Hi guys, how's it going? But it's pretty much just, you can do it in simple ways and just living out your faith. Something we want to talk about coming up this year, we have big things planned. We have guest speakers lined up to come on the podcast, some of which are professional Catholic speakers.
Yeah.
We have the March for Life coming up in January, which we're going to be at. We're going to have some footage of the march. We might even try to film something down there. It's going to be awesome. Our spring retreat, we're going to get footage of that. And just other big things in the works in regards to the podcast. Update on the schedule change. We're probably only going to do an episode every 2 weeks. And our thought process behind that is we want the best quality content instead of just rapidly putting out videos. So look for that probably every Sunday or Thursday every 2 weeks. And so I want to talk to you guys about this. Which one of your biggest things, that like goals for Brothers in Prayer this year?
Ooh.
I'll go
Yeah,
first.
that's all you.
If you want. Okay, so my biggest goal is obviously to fill the gym, but also that everyone who comes to the gym in the morning stays for BIP. I notice sometimes that people will come just for the basketball portion and they will leave for whatever reason. I'm sure they may be busy or they literally just want to play basketball, and I honestly don't blame them because who doesn't want to play basketball in the morning, right?
Right.
But I think the biggest thing to me is I want to fill the gym, you know? At first it was we wanted to fill the art room, and before that it was we wanted to fill the classroom. And after COVID, obviously there was a struggle with all those, but now getting our numbers back, I really think we can do it. We have an excellent freshman class this year, excellent sophomore, juniors, and seniors are all pitching in. We're all doing everything. I know you're not even a senior.
No.
And you're working you're working super hard. So keeping all that up and fill the gym, that would be it for me. What about you,
Absolutely, money. I think the more I think about Brothers in Prayer as a whole, one thing that I really do want to focus on this upcoming school year is just having real relationships with all the kids that are coming every Thursday, right?
Yeah.
Because it's super easy to show up there and then like go and lead and be one of the guys up front who's like emceeing the whole thing. But it's a whole other thing to actually know each kid that's in that room with you, that's taking the time out of their day to show up before school to your club. You know?
I think it makes a big impact too.
Actually, it makes a huge impact.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I know we have a couple of teachers here that do a phenomenal job of just knowing every single one of their students' name, right? And just the distance that goes in just you being one of the students knowing that they personally know you makes a huge difference, and it makes me appreciate them that much more, right?
Right.
So if I can kind of be one of those guys, just even the small things, know their name,
Building
right? How
relationships,
easy
of
is
course.
that? So building relationships.
That's awesome. All right, and I think what would be one of my goals, obviously, is to grow this podcast. But then I'd say one of my big goals is to coordinate with, like I said, professional Catholic speakers to kind of bring these guys in who are amazing at what they do, to where we can actually like have these guys give messages to our students here at CBC when they come to BIP. But I loved your goal of let's fill the gym.
Yeah.
Right. Let's get everyone to show up to BIP. Let's have a great time. Let's do it this year.
Yep.
And so we will continue to highlight BIP speakers on the podcast as well as the other things we talked about. And it's going to be an awesome year. Stay tuned for more, guys. Want to close out?
Yeah, absolutely. So real quick before we go, we made an agreement before this. I made an agreement before this that says if we actually have 100 subscribers by the end of this podcast, Xander's actually going to shave his head.
He is.
So make sure you get subscribed, click the like button, make sure the algorithm's doing its
Full
thing, so
buzz
we can
cut
get
all the way
like
around.
one from top to bottom. The whole thing's gone. So
I don't think I agreed to this.
make sure you
Well, you did
subscribe
now,
to the
so-
podcast.
gosh,
Yeah,
on the
it's-
spot.
We're in.
Close
we're
it
in.
out, Xander.
All right. St. John Baptist de La Salle.
Pray for us.
Live Jesus in our hearts.
Forever.
Thanks for listening to the Brothers in Prayer podcast. Our producer is Peter Coco. Our creative director is Xander Johnson. And our media relations director is Drew Hammett. Tune in every Thursday for more.